Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about everybody's favorite topic, reading music on the guitar. Most of the time we get given out to for not being able to read at all, for reading very slowly, for not knowing where the notes are on the guitar, for not caring about it, for being generally just really bad at it. And that's a reality many of us face, and I think most of that deservedly so. We are kind of bad at doing that. Like, I'm pretty terrible, and I did classical guitar for a huge part of my life as a kid, and I still can't read to save my life. What I want to do today is talk about a few things that helped me improve my reading and even made it kind of like a fun experience to get better with. First of all, I want to start with something I read in a Mick Goodrick book years ago. Mick Goodrick is, for maybe some of you who don't know him, he was, I think, for years the head of Berkeley Guitar. And he's famous, for me he was mostly famous, he was the guitarist in Gary Burt's band, I think in the 60s or 70s for a long time, probably more the 70s. I'll put it in here. He's an amazing guitarist, he's an amazing educator. If I would compare him to another guitarist, I probably would compare him. He's somewhat similar to the Jim Hall type of jazz guitar. And he's also really famous as a jazz educator. There's lots of people who studied under him who became quite famous afterwards. And he has this book, it's called The Advancing Guitarist. And it's an amazing guitar book. I'll probably do a whole video just about that book. It's very conceptual. Sometimes if you pick up a guitar book, you expect to find like a lick or something to learn with your fingers right away. This book is quite the opposite. It's more like of a lifetime pursuit of understanding the guitar a little bit better. And at the end he has this commentary which is really funny but also really good. And one part about the commentary is about the complexity of the guitar, and he says, like, he has a little note about sight reading in there as well, where he says he studied the guitar a lot, and he says sometimes if you feel bad about our playing in the way that we're not learning fast enough or not good enough at certain things like sight reading, he says be aware of how complex the guitar is in terms of as an instrument. Why are we that bad at sight reading? I think there's a couple of reasons. I think one of them kind of has to do with the complexity of the guitar. If you think of the note middle C, concert middle C, that's on our guitar, that's here. Okay? On a standard guitar you have about 5 different positions for that note. You can play it here, 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 and you can play it here. They all have a slightly different sound to it because it's a different string thickness, different place on the neck, but it's the same pitch. So when we see this note written down, if it's not guitar specific music, because sometimes in guitar specific music they give us markers on which position to play, but if it's like, let's say we read a lead sheet or something not specifically for guitar, we have to make that decision as a guitarist. Many other instruments on the piano, you're only one place for that note. It's in the middle of the piano, and if that note is written, you play exactly that note, that one position, that one key on the piano. We have like 5 positions, and granted some of them are less likely to come up, like when do you ever play middle C up here? Might be something very specific in terms of a tune or in terms of an arrangement, but a lot of the other options are legit. Like, you could very often play it here, or you could play it down here if you want to open strings maybe, or you could play it here if you need to reach higher up the neck. So we have to make a lot of decisions that are not given to us right away, and makes it harder. He says in his math, I think if I read correctly, the average note has about 2.8 locations on the guitar. So every note on average is almost in 3 different places on the guitar, and has, what's his average? 9.2, so around 9 different fingerings, practical fingerings. An impractical fingering, he says as an example, would be F with the pinky, so he doesn't count those, because here you kind of, like, that doesn't really make sense on the guitar to play a note like that. But his point in the book, and the quote is, the next time someone complains to you because your sight reading isn't what it should be, you'll know exactly what to tell them. And what he means by it is the complexity of this instrument. It's gonna take a long time to learn it well, so don't freak out about it. Like, work on it, but don't freak out about it. The second point I want to talk about is doing something that helped me a lot in college, and that is shifting my default position. I did classical guitar as a child really terribly, and I had a very patient teacher, but I wasn't good at all. But I knew maybe like the C major, G major. I knew the notes kind of in this kind of the open or our first position. Like, I knew my notes, I knew my way around the neck somewhere there because just of years of playing terribly. I knew that. I knew nothing of here at all, but I kind of knew that. And you run into problems. Sometimes open strings are something you don't want to because they have open strings are amazing, but they have a very different sound quality. So sometimes you want to have a very even kind of pitch to pitch melody, so you don't want open strings. So you run into problems in this position. Sometimes you want to fit chords underneath it. You run into problems. Very often you play music that goes up to a C, D or E, and that's a huge jump from your open position. And when you're stuck in a page, like reading something, you're not looking at your guitar when you're sight reading. So the last thing you want to do is constantly making huge leaps across the neck because you're going to lose your place. What I did, I kind of found C major in the middle of the guitar. Like I kind of, with your fourth finger on the 8th fret, your first finger on the 5th fret for the two C's. So I found, slightly out of tune, I found C major here. And I made sure that I knew, first of all, C major really well, that I knew, without looking at the guitar, this is a G, this is an E, C, D, G, A, E, F, that I knew all those notes without looking, kind of visualizing it. And then I would learn it maybe with, try to read something with a sharp or with a flat, and then kind of alter the C major scale. I know later on, if you read something with a lot of flats or a lot of sharps, there's different ways of doing it. But for the start, I really just wanted to know all those notes, because from here, it's still a bit of a leap upwards to like an E, D, or C. And it's also a bit of a leap downwards, but both of them are somewhat manageable and in range. And most of the music, especially when I was doing jazz and lead sheets, was kind of in and around this area. That helped me a lot. Okay, part number 3, that's the last part of this introduction to sight reading on the guitar, is material. I never really had that problem, but I know a lot of people I studied with had that problem. They were like, well, how can I practice sight reading? What can I read? And the answer is everything. Get your hands on everything. When I was in college in second year, the book we worked in second year a lot is this one here. I think there's like 3. You can also buy them all in one big book. It's the William Levitt. I should really know how to pronounce his name. Method Guitar Volume 2. It's the Berkeley Press. It's, I think, what they used for a long time in Berkeley. It's what they use in jazz colleges all over the world. It's a cool book to look through. I felt personally for sight reading, this one, there is sight reading exercises, and there's lots of stuff you can practice your sight reading, even if it's kind of not meant to be exactly for that purpose. I felt a lot of that is very pattern-y organized. I found myself very fast kind of recognizing the logic of certain patterns and then kind of just running my fingers through it without reading. So I think it's a good book to get anyway, and especially to start, because some of the stuff would be on the easier side to read. Definitely look into this one. If you maybe are a bit further in your sight reading, this might be too easy for you. The second book I want to recommend, or that's not particularly one book, but chances are, if you a guitarist watching this video and are into kind of jazz guitar, chances are that along your way you picked up something like this. That's like some random jazz transcription book. I kind of, every time I'm back in Germany, they have kind of, I don't know if that's exclusively to Germany, but since we have such a huge classical music scene, we have like a lot of shops that have like notations around, and they also have usually a small jazz corner. So I have kind of, I'm kind of fascinated with getting little books about transcriptions, other stuff. So I have a couple of those books around where there's like a Kenny Burrell or like a Charlie Christian transcription, just like written down in notation. I never really learned solos that way as for myself. Like I only really learn a transcription if I do it myself by ear. But I found those things, especially the easier solos, a great source of reading, like just really slowly getting through the thing. And like you have a good bit of sharps and flats, since it's kind of jazz, there's chromaticism, there's stuff like that. Rhythmic language, usually in the easier guitar solos, is not too crazy. You're dealing mostly like quarter notes, 8 notes, 16ths, but it's a really cool source for material to kind of get started with reading. And then lastly, or not lastly, second last, did I say 3 books? I have no idea what I'm talking about here. But this guy over here, speaking of German music, Bach. This is a great book. This is actually the cello suites transcribed for guitar, which I have no business of playing as like a performance piece, but there's some easier pieces in there which are totally readable, like depending on your ability to read, but like it's not all the mad 16s. That's a huge chunk of those kind of cello suites, but there's a bourrée, there's a courant, there's those other parts of those suites that are kind of less busy. You can play them slow, they sound beautiful, and it's great fun because it's beautiful music. Even if you play it super slow, it all fits together. It's Bach, it's magic. So get your hands on a book like that. Doesn't have to be the cello suites, any violin concerto, anything you can get from a classical composer you like, try to get it, try to read it. And then now, last but not least, is as material, the cover fell off because I used this thing for the better part of 10 years. It's a real book. Read standards as much as you can. Like read chords, we haven't talked about that at all today, but also read the heads and try to do it in 2 octaves, the way it's written and the way it might be transposed for guitar. So you have to learn in different parts of the neck. Start with very simple tunes, like something like Take the A Train with like barely any 8 notes in it or barely any 16th notes in it. Stuff like that, long notes, easy stuff. Like don't start with Charlie Parker, the Omnibook or anything like that. That's mad to read. That's maybe when you're really good, you get there. But try like all of me, read it if you don't already know it. Like try things you don't know yet with simple melodies, and it will do you a world of good. You might find a tune you really like and learn it. Okay, that's it for me today. Brief introduction to reading, some thoughts. Just by wrapping up here, there's like about 10 things I haven't touched on which really help with learning to read. So there will definitely be another video about this topic. Thanks so much for sticking with the channel. Thanks for checking out the video. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.